They thought stealing my chair would steal me. They were wrong. I sat in a taxi with my coat still warm from the office and a single email humming in my outbox, the kind of email that breaks rooms, breaks reputations, breaks families. I didn't shout. I didn't burn the photos or smash anything. I pressed send and walked out while the world still believed itself whole. When I first walked into Connor and Vale, I carried nothing but a battered briefcase and a stubborn belief that work could be a kind of honesty. Graham, the man who owned the corner office and everyone who bowed to its view, looked at me like I was a tool and, for a long time, I let him use me. He called me the fault spotter once, in a way that made me proud. He meant it as a compliment, find the crack before the ceiling falls. So I did. I learned every hinge and seam of that building. I learned which managers lied politely and which ones pocketed futures, and then Miles arrived. Miles never took the elevator like the rest of us. He rode the stairwell of nepotism straight to the top and complained when he had to take the handrail. He spoke like a man reading someone else's speech, he laughed at the wrong pauses, he congratulated decisions he had not earned. The first time he presented an idea that had my fingerprints all over it, he smiled as if invention were a trophy you could inherit. People laughed at him the way you laugh at a child juggling knives, nervous, suppressed. Graham laughed louder than anyone. The rest of us learned to make room for this rightful heir who would ruin what he inherited. I kept quiet. Not because I was afraid of conflict, because I had a different plan for justice. Quiet, I realized, is like dry wood. Given a small spark it can burn clean and fast. 6 months of looking was what it took. 6 months of late nights, of watching cursor-moving lines of names and numbers that didn't belong, of following paper trails as though they were rivers and not a landfill. It started as clumsy things, misfiled invoices, a vendor who never answered calls, an extra zero in the wrong column. Then it became deliberate, invoices that pointed, always, to the same shell companies, payments that folded into private accounts overseas, signatures that looked like Miles but had a different rhythm when you traced them. I kept copies. Not for leverage at first, for proof. Proof is a quiet hunger. You feed it with documents and it grows until it can speak for itself. One Friday night I came back to the office because grief and habit are terrible twins. There was the smell of bourbon, the soft glow of a desk lamp on a man who thought he owned futures. Miles had his shoes kicked up on the wood, a drink sliding down his palm. He didn't bother to hide the smugness. "This will be mine," he said, like a king rehearsing his coronation. "You'll understand soon enough." He took a photo, my empty chair, the leather worn at the edges where I'd sat for years, and typed a caption like an epitaph. He posted it as if it were victory. I watched it load, watched the little voice bubble confirm and the image fly into the ether. The laugh that followed felt like a blade being tested. This is the part people picture wrong. Revenge is rarely a shout. It's a geometry problem. It requires angles and timing and the exact right weight of silence. I didn't storm into the room and demand apologies. I put together an envelope of evidence, not a ranting manifesto, not a smear campaign, but a clear, surgical packet that would make any lawyer's mouth water. Contracts, bank transfers, vendor chains, time-stamped emails that linked Miles' account to the shell companies. I labeled nothing with drama. I named everything with facts. I hit send 10 minutes before the product launch, the launch we'd all rehearsed under bright lights and press-friendly smiles. 10 minutes before the cameras, before the investors who still believed in Graham's golden touch. 10 minutes before the room would be full of people who had to decide in the next hour who they would be, defenders of a fallible empire or witnesses to a collapse. The firm's counsel walked into the boardroom like someone carrying a body. He slid his phone across the mahogany, and for a breathless second the only sound was that tiny click when leather met floor. Graham read, and the color left his face in layers. He looked at Miles the way a man looks at a son he suddenly realizes is a stranger. "Call her now," he said, voice brittle. He meant me, but the thing about being seen is that you see back newsrooms, investors, and regulators don't need speeches. They need receipts. The boardroom fractured on the spot. Miles stammered. He used the little tricks of the unpracticed liar, evade, pivot, blame. It didn't matter. We had built the case like a tide. It rose and it took him. I had imagined the fall like a scene in a film, dramatic, satisfying, a perfect cut to black. Life doesn't cut the way film does. It leaves a smear of consequences. Within 24 hours, Miles was out. Publicly severed. His father's office resembled a hospital room, doctors of image and legacy trying to resuscitate a brand that refused to breathe. Board members spoke in whispers that sounded like knives. Investors wrote letters that read like executions. Graham called me, 50 voicemails, all of them variations on the same theme: fury, pleading, bargaining. I listened to none of them. For a night I wandered through the city with my phone on silent. I watched the skyline I once admired look back at me with different eyes, the towers like witnesses, waiting to see who would be first to light a cigarette of regret. People ask if I felt justified. They ask if I was happy. The honest answer is complicated. For a decade I had been the fix, the person who steered storms away and patched the leaks after men celebrated while I mopped. They wanted me efficient, invisible, grateful. When you spend years preventing collapse for people who will never mention your name at dinner, resentment is a quiet animal under the floorboards. You can step around it. Or you can let it out. Here is the thing that made all of this different: it wasn't only about Miles taking a chair. That photo was an admission, not of ownership, but of entitlement. An entitlement eats institutions from inside. What I did to them was more than punishment. It was revelation. Light searing through cracks they had painted over. Cold, cruel exposure. It left a ruin. But it also left truth. You should know something about that email. You should know I did not only send other people's sins. I sent mine too. While I was tracing Miles' signatures, I found that this company had a long history of convenient disappearances, deals that benefited people in ways that people never spoke of. Years ago, when I was newer and still naive enough to believe loyalty meant protection, I patched one of those disappearances. I did it because Graham asked, because the company needed a bandage to get through an audit, because I believed, foolishly, that a lie could be a temporary tool for a greater good. In the packet that arrived in the council's inbox that afternoon, between the spreadsheets and the bank records, there was one file titled simply, "My Confession." It was a letter I had written in the quiet of one winter night, a letter that detailed how I had helped reorder ledgers and how I'd once looked the other way. I sent it to the same people I was exposing. I cut off my own oxygen supply. Why? Because truth that points only outward is cowardice. If I wanted them to believe the wreckage was real, I had to admit my fingerprints were on the cleanup, too. I wanted no one to be able to call me a vengeful trickster and nothing more. I wanted this to be absolute. No bargaining. No bargaining chips. No safe route back. People will call it noble. People will call it madness. I don't care which they whisper. I traded a career for a clean record of truth, and I don't regret the trade. Now the chair sits empty. Graham keeps calling. Miles is a cautionary tale they put on slides for new hires. Do not be Miles. The empire that held us all feels smaller, raw at the seams, and maybe, freer. To be honest, what I can't tell you is whether I saved anything beyond my own sense of self. Maybe I burned bridges that one day could have been a path back. Maybe I lit a fire that will scorch more than it warms. But when I lie in bed, the thing that keeps me awake is not regret. It's the sound that used to haunt me, the little lie you whisper to make your life easier. I don't hear it anymore. So here's what I want you to do, because this is what the story is for me now. Tell me what you would have done. Would you have sent that email? Would you have included your own name in the files? Would you have left the chair, or sat and taken it? Comment below. Tell me which side of the window you were on while it all went down. And if you liked hearing this, share it, not because I want applause, but because people need to decide for themselves what justice looks like: a slow burn, a cold light, or a confession that eats you from the inside out.